Right, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for waiting. My name's Ed. I work in the professional services team within the SpotlerUK office. So today, I'm taking you through the Spotler Mail Plus platform, specifically the messages and the mailings section within the platform, just to give you sort of an overview of our new drag and drop editor and to show you how you can use one of those messages that you build in a mailing and also have a look at some reports behind that as well. I'll stick around after today's webinar has finished and answer any questions you've got, so please feel free to pop them into the questions box and I'll get around to them at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So this is the home page within the platform. What I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the messages tab on the left-hand side. In there, you'll see your list of messages that have previously been created with some folders on the left-hand side. So you can create folders, keep them nice and tidy within there. You've also got these sort of major folders at the top here. So you've got campaign messages, automation messages, and templates. So depending on what sort of area the message is used in, they'll fall into one of these tabs at the top here. Again, sort of keep it nice and tidy. You've also got the archive sort of tab up here as well. You have the option of when you actually send out a mailing to automatically archive that message after it's gone out. So quite useful if you know that you'll only be using that once, and then after that campaign or mailing has gone out, you won't ever use that sort of message again. So you can automatically archive it, which is quite a good feature. So as I mentioned, today I'll go through our new editor, which released a couple of months ago. So what I'll do now is I will click on this new message button, top right-hand corner. And then we've got the old editor and then our new one here. So I'll click on the V2 button there. I can give it a name, so I might call it Spotler message as the example. Below that, I got my message type, so you can choose either email or SMS, obviously email for this webinar today. Below that is the unsubscribe package, so you can have more than one here. Our default one at the moment for this particular account is no unsubscribe package, but it might be that you as for this example, you don't want to include one, maybe it's a service email, or it might be that you have a normal marketing email that's going out, so you would sort of choose either the service, e.g. no package, or your sort of typical marketing unsubscribe option. So you can select which one to use there, but for us, we've only got this one to select here. Save and next. I can then specify who I am sending this to. Basically just saying when the sort of recipient receives this email in their inbox, who is it addressed to? So either the email or first name is normally the sort of typical ones we recommend, but I'm going to stick with email for the time being. Below that, I've got my sender name. So you can set this up in settings where you have a default value here for us at Spotler, but you can always override that per campaign or per message. So I can sort of put my own sender name here. You can A/B test different sender names. So it might be you wanted to test sort of the company name versus Ed from Spotler as the other sender and see which one has more engagement. So you can certainly do that there, but I will stick with one for the time being. Below that, I've got a subject line, so I can add in my subject line. So I could do this week's newsletter as the example. And again, I can add in a second subject line if I wanted to. Look at our new products, for example. And I can also include a personalization value if I wanted to here as well. So essentially allowing me to select maybe their first name, for example. I can basically choose that value there, click OK, that'll then be pulled through depending on what sort of data I hold against that recipient. We can always create a fallback as well because you don't happen to have their first name for whatever reason. Below that, you can include a snippet. You can basically include like a description of that email. So that would go in here. I'm going to put a description here, if I can spell correctly. So you put in your description there, so basically just a snippet of what the email contains. Obviously for real email, you actually put in quite a helpful description, not just the word description. But like before, you can split test and you can sort of test which one works better. After a period of time, you can then choose a winner and then that'll be pulled through as the winning snippet within that email. And then lastly on this page here, you just got the basically the reply address. So if someone does want to reply to one of these messages, the message will be forwarded across this address here. So again, you can set those values, but I just one of my colleagues here from the Netherlands team. We'll just put a second one here as an example. Save and next, I've then got my preview message. Obviously, I'm creating a new message. I don't have anything to see here, but if I was opening up a previous message that I built, I would see a sort of preview one of the messages I built. But for me, I want to just click and edit there. That'll open up on your editor. So to begin with, you can choose one of our templates. So as I mentioned, as it is new, we've only got a couple in here, but we are looking to expand this, where there will be additional sort of example templates for you to choose from. But I suspect most of you will want to start from a blank page and obviously use your own brand guidelines for that as well. So that's what I'll do today. But if you want to use one of the templates, feel free to have a go with them. There's also different categories you can pick from. So when we do sort of expand this template library, you can sort of choose a template category that matches the sort of email you want to build now. Otherwise, you can sort of create your own templates and save them here as well. But I will start with an empty page. That'll then load up the editor. So I've got my message that I'm building in the middle of the page. I've got my options to help build that message on the left-hand side, and I've got my sort of settings at the top here. So to take us through the settings, we've got the save button, which just saves the email that I'm working with. I've then got the preview button, just preview that message and sort of shows it in a desktop, mobile, or tablet view. I've got undo and then redo. I can see my previous version. So if I was opening up a message I built last week and made any changes, I could see what the changes were last week, sort of before I made my changes today. I can always look at a previous version. I can look at the web analytics. So again, we can set these by default, but these are the ones that we have for each of our customers by default, but they can always be updated. So you've got the campaign medium. So when that's pulled through into Google Analytics, you can sort of specify the campaign medium, the source, and the message name here as well. So message name by default campaign name will just pull through the message name. So whatever I've pulled this message, that'll be pulled through by default. But as I said, I can always update that if I wanted to. It will show you an example URL. So whenever you include a link here, we'll automatically add in these UTM parameters to that link. I can view the source code of the email. So you can also view the HTML preview. So if you want to export that, you always could do. I can sort of select a different template. So if I wasn't happy with just using a blank one, I can always override that with a different template there. And then lastly, I can save this email as a template. So once I've finished building a message, if I really like it, I can always save it as a template to use in another campaign if I wanted to. So to start building out the email, on the left-hand side, I've got elements. So I can literally just drag these in, and these elements will then appear here on the page. I can then update this element. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my sort of structure of the email to begin with. So on the left-hand side, I've also got content, which I could just drag in a previously saved piece of content. So it might be that you saved your header or your footer. You can always drag those in, but I'm going to start really, from scratch. On the left-hand side, I've got my structures. So I've already got a single section and a single row here. So that might be great if maybe a view online piece of text, so a link to view the email online. But below that, I might want to include another single row where I can pull through a logo, for example. And then behind that, the last option here might be I want to pull through the navigation bar, so a few links to the website. After that, I can go back, and then below that, I'm going to include another section, and I actually want to start building up the content of my email here. So again, I'm sort of starting off with one single row here, and that could maybe be a hero image, for example. But what I'll do just to make this just to bring out, pad out the email a little bit, let's just start with the header to begin with, and we can move on to the actual content of the message and below that. So if I sort of minimize that, go into elements, I'll start by dragging on a piece of text. As I said, I want to have this as my view online link. So you can have view online as a text there. At the top here, I've got my text editor. On the left-hand side, I've got my settings. We've also got desktop versus mobile. So you can change, for example, the padding to be greater on mobile and less on desktop, for example. So you can sort of tweak it based on what device the user is sort of viewing the email with. And then you've got settings as well, so you can hide this individual element in desktop or mobile. So for here, I'm going to basically include a link here. So I'm going to click into this piece of text, highlight it, and the left-hand side here, I've got this chain icon, the link icon. Click on that, it then gives me the option to add in a link. So for my view online link, I want to include a different link type to external web link. I'm going to choose a special link, basically a system link. So for view online, I'm going to use the link to the online version, but there are other options here like the unsubscribe link as well, but I'm going to stick with online version. Click on OK, and that is now my view online version. I can always click into here, and I can always override the text color if I wanted to and choose a different shade of blue. I can certainly do that. So below there, I'm going to include a copy of our logo. So all I would need to do is drag in an image there into that row, click into that element. On the left-hand side, similar to the piece of text I added in, I've got a few options to sort of further customize that. So the first one being select that image. Clicking on select loads up the image editor or the library of images that you have. So these ones are previously uploaded to our demo account. but you can always upload a fresh image here by clicking on that and then choosing one from your PC. You can choose an external image, so you can grab one from your website, for example, and paste in the source of that image there, or you can use our stock library. So there are a few images to pick from here. You can search based on a keyword, or you can also choose a color to search on as well. So it should be quite helpful if you are struggling to sort of get those images yourself. You can always use one of our stock library images. But for me, I believe we've already got a logo in here. There you go, so I'll choose our logo there, click on OK, and that's then going to pull through our logo. Obviously, I might want to include some padding here. It's quite big, so below here I can add in some padding. So I might want to make that maybe 50 just to increase that padding a little bit, just a bit, add a bit more space. I can always choose the padding for each individual side. So maybe top and bottom I don't need as much padding, so I can make that 20 instead, and the bottom can be 20, and I can sort of just customize that. So really easy to add in that padding and create a bit of space between those elements. Below the image sort of add button, I've got a few editing options. So I can edit the image. So clicking this pencil icon allows me to add in some text. Obviously for a logo, probably not a lot of editing you would need to do. But for other images, you can add in maybe a line of text, add in against an image, or you can maybe rotate it, for example. So there are a few other options you've got on this page here. You've also got another editor there where you can crop the image if you needed to crop it within the platform. Below that, I can add in my description of the image. So it might be a logo. I can also add in a tooltip text as well, so make that logo as well. And then below that, again, I click on the link icon. I can then set my URL. So I want to put in the link type as external link with tracking. The link name is going to be Spotler logo and homepage to help it in reports where I can identify what link this is sort of taking me through to. I can then put in my link here. Fantastic, that's going to link through to the Spotler homepage. Below that, I can specify whether this is a conversion link or not. This is really important. So it might be that you've got your social media links, for example. They're not necessarily the most important links within the email. They're not going to convert to any sales. You want to include them. Likewise, it might be a link to the privacy policy, for example. But for this one here, I might be linking through to a product page, for example. If I was doing that, I'd want to make sure this is set to a conversion link because they're more likely to convert, and I can sort of track that separately to the rest of my links. So for a header, I'm probably going to say no, it's just linking through the home page. But if I include a product, for example, or a link to a category page, I certainly would want to make that as a conversion link so I can track that in reports. Click on OK, that's now included that link there. And as I mentioned before, like the text option, I've got different sort of options I can include here where I can align the image if I wanted to and add in a border if I needed to as well. For each of these elements, you've also got the option to add in your own CSS or a custom HTML class. So if you are wanting to sort of customize it further, you can certainly do that as well. As I mentioned before, you can also hide the element on desktop and mobile. So now I've got the logo in there. Below that, I want to include a navigation element. So here I can select my navigation. I can then maybe center these items and I can maybe choose my navigation items. So it might be, the first one is taking us through to the home page. And again, I'd want to specify my link to the home page there. Below that might be a what's new page. So I can take it through to what's new. And then lastly, it might be an about us page. And again, you can add in more items here if you needed to, and you just need to update those links there. You can customize the color of that background if you wanted to. So I can always make that different color, like make it a shade of gray, for example. And then like before, I can always add in some advanced CSS classes if I needed to. Cool, so going back there, below that, I might want to include a sort of a main image to start us off with. This is a new section now. So below that, I'm gonna drag in an image. And again, clicking on that, I can then select my image and I might want to include one of these images here. Click on OK, that's now pasted that into the message. I sort of started off by building my content. Below that image, I want to add in a spacer. So I could either add in a spacer or maybe a divider, but I just want a bit of space between this and the piece of text I want to include. So below that spacer, I'm going to drag in some text. In the text, I can always customize that there. I can always increase the font size here to make that a bit larger. And I might want to start it off by saying hello and then pushing through their first name. So like the subject line, if you just click on this little customize P option, I can then click on that. that will allow me then to pull through a sort of personalized value into this option here. There are different types that I can pull through here, but I'm happy just to use a contact field for this example. Below that, I can then choose my contact field. So I'm going to choose first name here. I can always add an alternative value in. This might be a customer as alternative value if you didn't have their first name. Click on OK. That's then going to pull through their first name, and it's going to be highlighted yellow. Just make it super obvious that is a customized value. Below that, I might want to drag in a structure and then drag in 2 rows. And I'm going to include maybe like an article. So I can go into elements, I can pull through some text to have on the left-hand side, and then maybe an image on the right-hand side. So again, clicking on image, I then select my image. I can then choose my image that I want to use in the article, click on OK, that's then going to pull through. And then for the text, I can then, like before, I can then customize that text, including the personalization if I wanted to. And any links back in that link icon to link through to any page on the website. Like before, on the left-hand side, you've got lots of different options for customizing this piece of content. So when I click on this individual element, I can see it's highlighted the text sort of section that I clicked on, but I can go back a step and go into the row instead. That's now set to the whole row. I can go back and step even further on this one here. That takes me through to the overall section. And so depending on what you selected, you can then customize the background color for that, the alignment, add in a background image, for example. This one here, again, I might want to click into the row and then add in a background color for that row. I can change the column width, for example, to make this image a bit smaller, have more sort of space for the text. So lots of customizations you can sort of do here to sort of suit the content or the message that you are building. And if I click on the section, for example, I can rearrange that section. So I'm just drag it around. Any other elements, I can literally just click on them. And then wherever I sort of see that blue line, I can then let go, and that then realigns those elements. Go back in section, I can duplicate this section, so I can just make a copy of it. I can also save as a block, which is really useful. So that would then save it in my content section here, where I can then sort of easily drag that back into the email when I build an email next time. So again, I probably want to save the sort of header and maybe the footer as well. And then when I build an email next week, I can easily drag those in and they'll be sort of ready and waiting for me there. I can also delete the section as well. The other option I want to show you was the settings. So I can click on settings. I can also add in some conditions. So I can say only those who match certain conditions will see this sort of section within the email. So it might be I'm targeting those who have previously shopped t-shirts or coats or jackets. So what I can do is I can then click on custom here. I can then choose my group of people where they've only sort of shopped those specific items. I can click on them. I can then move them into selected items. Click on OK. I can add in more than one if I wanted to. Click on OK. And then only those who match that criteria will then be pulled through and will sort of see this area of the email. I can also add in multiple sections where I have one section for t-shirts, one section for jeans, for example, one for shoes, and then depending on what content they've looked at previously or bought previously, as long as you're giving us that data, we can then customize that email to suit their sort of preferences essentially. I can also maybe just remove that condition here and use the A/B split test instead. So like I've done for the subject line and the snippet, I can also split test the content within the email. So I can say only those who are set to receive version A will actually see this piece of content. Those who are receiving version B won't see that, they'll see the content below, for example. I can also lock the block, so it might be quite useful for this section up here. I can lock it down because really I shouldn't ever need to modify the view online, the logo, all these navigation items. And if I do, it's very easy to come in and unlock it. But to save any accidental changes in the future, I can lock it down so that hopefully is prevented in the future. Going back here, as I mentioned, you can sort of customize each element based on mobile or desktop. So if I click into this one here, go into mobile, at the moment, it's sort of touching the edge of the message. I could, if I wanted to, add in a bit of padding. So I've sort of created that bit of a gap for that message, but specifically on mobile, not for desktop. Cool, so going back here, the other option you've got here is a video. So if I wanted to, I could then drag that into the email there. I could then choose my video source, so paste in a YouTube URL. And then what it will do is it will show a thumbnail image of that video. It will then apply a play sort of icon on top of that. So it looks like it's a video. If they click on that play icon, it will take them through into YouTube. And it's quite a good way of sort of, basically sort of posting a video within the email, but it will link through to the YouTube page instead. I can drag in a countdown timer, which is quite useful. So what I'll do is I'll go into structures and I'll add in a new section here. Go to elements, and I'm going to drag in my countdown timer. So it might be counting down to a sale, for example. So I click into it, like in the image, and just click on this add time button, and then sort of generate that preview, then choose my date and time. So yeah, depending on what date and time I select, it'll then count down to that specific time. And then what we'll do is when someone opens up the email, we'll load in a GIF, which counts down to this sort of date and time that you specified in here. And if they then close down that email and then open it a day later, we'll regenerate that GIF and it will show them an up-to-date countdown as to when the sale will end or start, for example. That's quite a useful option to use. Going back, I've got the option to include some product recommendations. So I might want to pull through just an individual product. So there is a product that we've got quite a lot of stock of. We just sort of need to sort of shift that product. So I can choose just a static product. I can then choose my product. I can then pull that through into the email, click on OK. That'll then get pulled through because we've got that product in our product library because it's linked through to the e-commerce website. We can then basically pull through that item. I can always customize the text here. Obviously, it's in Dutch. I'm going to change it into English, but you can always customize it. It's just using that sort of base sort of product database where we're pulling through the image, the title, the description, but you can always customize it further. There are also options to include recommendations through RSS feeds or sort of the other sort of method of pulling through recommendations. So you can sort of drag those in, and again, you sort of create the logic there, and you can pull through recommendations into the email. We can also drag in a custom block here, and you can essentially just add in your own custom HTML if you wanted to. So yeah, you can just sort of create that HTML there if you needed to. That's essentially it for the sort of the main content of the message. As you can see, really easy to sort of drag in that content, customize it based on who is going to, or who you'd like to sort of see those individual bits of content, or do some split testing. To finish this off now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into elements. I'm going to drag in, sorry, structures, drag in another section. Just going to drag in basically create my footer essentially. Go into elements. I'm then going to pull in some social media icons. Click into it. And like before, I've got options on the left-hand side where I can select my icon style. So I might want to choose a color square. That'll then change the design of those social media icons. I can click to add any additional ones in here. I can remove certain ones if I want to. So if I add in Reddit, I can also remove it if I accidentally added it in. And like before, click on that little link icon. I can then add in my actual Facebook URL here, and that'll then update to the correct link. Like before, I can always customize this a bit further by clicking on these little icons down here to increase or decrease the size there. Going back, lastly, I can add in some text and include my unsubscribe link. So I can double click onto that, modify the clip text. And like before, just highlight that whole piece of text, click on the P tag there, choose my personalization type. Oh, sorry, not the P tag there, sorry, the link tag instead, the link, sorry. I can then choose my link type. So this is going to be a special link. I can then use the link to the unsubscribe page. Click on OK, that then becomes the unsubscribe page. Like before, I can always sort of customize that further by highlighting it. I can change the color of the link, for example, or increase or decrease the text. I've always got that control. And then just to finish off, I might want to add in a background color for the footer, just a very light gray. And also go into the row and also add in a color there as well. That's perfect. Maybe I should remove the color from the section, just have it as the row instead. Cool, so that's essentially a very, very simple email, but very quick to do. And once you've created one email, you can, as I said, you can save it as a template. And then when you come to build out a new message, you can then literally just choose your template and it makes it even quicker. Or if you happen to, you can sort of save these blocks there. And again, like I mentioned before, you can go into content and then drag in those blocks. So, once you've created a couple of messages, you can make it even quicker for yourself, then sort of make that email next time around. But all I need to do now is just click on that save icon and that'll then save that message. I can close the editor, that'll then show me a preview now that I've actually built one, and I can now do save and finish, and that then saves that message. So this is my message here, spot the message. On the right hand side, I can come to the drop down, I can edit that message, that'll take me through to the options here. Below there, I can open the editor, takes me straight through to the editor. I can test that message. So really useful. I can basically specify certain recipients or certain people within the database to be in a test group. So what I want to do is when I go in here, I want to select myself. any members of my team, they can all sit within this test group. I can then click on OK, and then we can very quickly receive test emails in the future. Or you can, of course, specify an individual recipient by putting in their first name here if you have specified a first name in the email and also their email address. Choose whether they receive variant A or variant B. Click on OK, they'll then receive a copy of that message. Lastly, I've got the change status. This is really important at the moment. I'm in draft mode. So if I want to create a mailing or a campaign, I wouldn't be able to use this message because I haven't specified it as a final. It's sort of, I have finished testing. I haven't done that yet. So what I need to do, click on change status. I can then choose final. Unfortunately, I haven't, because we haven't got the unsubscribe package within this message. I'm not able to do that, but I'll choose another message and actually send out the mailing as the example. But I want to go back there, actually include, a working subscribe package. If I've included a link in the email, I can then choose that as like a final sort of status for this message. Otherwise, I can move it over to testing just to indicate that I am actually currently testing it. As you saw, there was an error. I want to go back and actually make sure I rectify that. So that's just sort of saying, it's in testing mode. But once you sort of happy with the message, you can move it into final. It will then show here as that green sort of final icon there. You can then use that in an actual mailing when you actually go and send out or create that mailing. The option here you can view it. So yeah, you can view it in desktop, mobile, or tablet. If you are including variants, you can specify whether the preview should be for variant A or variant B. Obviously, variant B, there wasn't much content in there because I sort of hid that overall section, that first section. So variant A will be the bigger email that I've got here. And then below that, we've got a few options like rename, I can duplicate, I can move it between folders, I can archive it, or I can delete it as well. So what I'll do now that I've created my message, I need to go into mailings. On the mailings tab, I've got folders on the left-hand side. I've got the previous mailings that have already gone out. So you can sort of see the number of contacts that were sent to here and the current status of that mailing. So if it was an A/B test, I can always see, sort of if the winner has been selected yet, or if it's been manually cancelled, or if it's currently being sent, I'll see that there, or if it's scheduled for the future, I would see that in here as well. What I'll do now is I'll create a new mailing, give it a name, so spot test, and I can choose my type, so I'm going to choose email here, but you could choose SMS. My message, as I mentioned, because I wasn't able to set that as final because I included an unsubscribe link, even though I specified there was no unsubscribe package for this email, I haven't actually got that message in my drop down here. But all I need to do is just select my message that actually had been loaded as a final. I can then choose that will then be pulled through here. Click on next. I can then choose my target group. So I can either select a dynamic list, so it might be you've got a pot of data or an audience or a small section of your wider sort of database that you want to send to. I would then select that sort of group of data there. I can then choose that. Otherwise, I could do a static list, so just people who I've sort of uploaded as a one-off. I could choose that, or it could be non-open. So if they haven't opened a specific sort of mailing that I previously sent out, I could choose that instead. Click on next. I can then specify whether this should be set as sort of within a trend report, whether it should be fed automatically into one of our trend reports. So trend reports are really useful. They allow you to group certain mailings together and to view the sort of results from all of those mailings in one report. So it might be that I'm sending out my weekly mailing or weekly campaign. I might want to include the weekly trend report here. So I would need to create that in advance. So I'd create my weekly sort of campaign in advance as a trend report. I would then forever sort of the next weekly mailings moving forward, I could then sort of use that trend report. They'd all be grouped together. And again, I can also select a folder if I wanted to sort of sort out and organize the trend reports. But I'll choose no trend report for the time being. I can always add this mailing into a trend report afterwards, but do forget to do it. But as I mentioned, you'd want to create that trend report in advance, which is your weekly sort of sends. I can then use that weekly sends in that drop down there. But I'll use no trend report just so I can show you how you can actually include that in the future. Click on next. I can then set my schedule, so I can choose a later. So I'll set it to be maybe a couple weeks time. Click on next. I can then basically confirm my message, so I can view my message there, confirm any sort of options that I set for it, confirm I'm happy to send out that mailing. Click on save and finish. That'll then schedule that mailing. So you can see here the status is currently scheduled because it's due to go out in a couple of weeks' time. It's not actually set to go out immediately. If it was set to send immediately, you would see that it would start to send here. It would then give you that message there as well. As I mentioned, you can always include this in a trend report afterwards. So if it's already gone out or it hasn't gone out yet, but you forgot to include it in the trend report, you can always include it in the trend report there as well. So what I'll do now is I'll head into trend reports, just show you how that works. So we've got a couple of examples here. This one here has a couple of mailings that are included here, but you can always, as I mentioned, add in your new trend report. You can then specify a name, specify the target here, type of sort of content that's being included here. So for here, I might want to include one which is weekly sends. My target is B2C and the type of content is marketing. Save and next, I can choose a folder or I can basically put it into the root. I can then say whether I want to receive an automated email which contains these sort of stats for your trend report. So I can specify that, 10 days after it sets up, I want to receive an email. Click on Save and Finish. That's now created my trend report. We can have a look at one that's previously set up. Double click into it. We can then view the trend report. So the first tab here is my impact tab. So I can see basically top level stats, the number of people that we sent to, those who we were able to deliver to or the email was accepted, number of opens and the number of clicks. Below that we put conversions. Because we're linked up to the e-commerce website, we can see here who actually clicked on one of those links to actually go onto the store. Unfortunately, from those couple of campaigns that we included in this trend report, unfortunately it didn't result in any shopping carts created, so they didn't add anything to their basket. But if they had done, we would start to see those numbers be pulled through into here because we had that integration. And so I sort of see that shopping cart number, and hopefully they go ahead and convert, and we can see the turnover for that as well. Below, we can see the sent emails, so you can see sort of time frame as to when they were sent. You can always highlight a specific section. So if you were included quite a number of sort of mailings within this trend report, you could highlight maybe 1 month, for example, and have a look and see sort of the monthly stats for those campaigns that are included. And then you can see a breakdown of those emails down below. Effectiveness, so you can see the acceptance rate, the open rate and the click to open rate in this graph here. And again, I can sort of highlight a specific timestamp and look into that in a bit more detail. And I can see the breakdown of those stats below. Conversions, again, unfortunately, this didn't result in any orders, but if it had done, I can see the sort of the monetary value from this campaign that went out, this mailing, I can see how successful that was in terms of the number of orders. I can see those stats down there below if I had any data for that. Viral effect, if I included a share button where they can share on a certain social media channel, I'll then see the stats there. But again, for the two mailings that I've included in the trend report, no one's clicked on one of those links where they can share the sort of content on Twitter, for example. That wasn't included and it wasn't clicked on, unfortunately. Subscriber retention. So for those who received the email, were there any hard bounces, unsubscribes, or if there were soft bounces as well? So you can see here for the two mailings that were included in this trend report, you can see here, sort of who unsubscribed and the sort of the subscription rate there as well after the campaign's finished. So yeah, quite high there, which is good. Only a few people unsubscribed. So the trend report, I can always export the graphs. I can create an export of these graphs within the report. I can also export the raw data, and I can also refresh the report. So it might be that you've left your PC sort of with this tab open for a couple of days. You can always come in here and click on the refresh button. That'll then refresh the report. If I go back into the overview tab and have a look at one of these reports for a previous mailing that went out, click on the little drop down here. I've then got this report button. So we can have a look at the reports for this individual mailing. It's quite similar to the trend reports, similar sort of data, but it's for this individual campaigns reports rather than a couple that we're looking at. So for here, we can see the effectiveness. So we can see here sort of how, again, like before, how effective it was. So the number of sends that we were able to send to, the accepted emails, the unique opens, and then the unique clicks as well. Again, if there were any conversions from this message, we would see the conversion rate for that message there as well. And then the conversions to the online store as well. Subscriber retention rates. So of those who received the email, were there any unsubscribes? You can see there were 2. The category of the unsubscribes, whether they just used the unsubscribe link or they clicked on the spam button. And again, if they clicked on any sort of social links within the email, you would see those there as well. Delivery, so the acceptance rate, which was pretty high, only 2 people bounced, and we can see the reasons for those bounces below, which was the hard bounce. And we can see the domains, which is our testing domain here, with the 2 domains that bounce. So if you had quite a few for Gmail, for example, as a soft bounce, you might sort of deduce from that it was just having a bad day where Gmail wasn't able to accept the email. Luckily, most of the time, the next time you send out an email, that will then be received, but you can have a look and you can see sort of what ESP or domain is being the culprit in terms of the bounces if there is a sort of one sticking out. Opens, we can see the open rates, so those that opened versus those who didn't. And then obviously, most of the time you're sending out a mailing or an email, the first sort of day or so is the most critical for that content to be read. So we can sort of see a breakdown for the first 48 hours. Like before, you can always highlight a specific section and then see that in a bit more detail. You can also see the opens for the whole week as well. Below that, we can see the opens by email client. So the majority of opens in this case were from Outlook, but there were a few that were on iPhone as well. We can also see the open rate for those actually, the open rate for actually those who, basically received the email as well. Clicks below here, we can see the clicked open rate to those who received the email and actually clicked through versus those who didn't. See those two graphs there as well. Basically, those who opened and those who didn't open. Below that, we can see the links that were clicked as well. So you can see the link name and the percentage of clicks overall they received, and then see a breakdown of the URL as well. A visual display of the clicks. So you can see here any ones that are highlighted. Again, being a test one, there isn't actually much data for here, but if you had some proper data in here, you would see sort of any highlighted areas of the email that were clicked on. We scroll up, we can do conversion clicks. As I mentioned, there was an option to specify whether the link was a conversion link or not. This is where you could sort of use that data here. So you can see here that any links that were marked as a conversion link, you can see how successful they were versus those who clicked a non-conversion link. So you can see that breakdown there. So the majority of clicks were a non-conversion link, which I guess makes sense. But there were 20% that were actually a conversion specific link. Obviously, that depends on how many links you include that are marked as conversion. And you can see a breakdown of the link and the URL below. Conversions, again, because we're linked up with the website, and we can see those who have actually converted. And unfortunately, there weren't any for these couple of campaigns, or this campaign in particular, so we can't see that there, but we can see that 100% of those 43 contacts who actually clicked through, they didn't actually go ahead and actually purchase an item. The A/B test, so as we run an A/B test for this one here, I'm able to see the results from that A/B test. So I can see that there. And again, it looks like it's pretty close, but I can see the results from that test there. And that's essentially it for today's webinar. I'm just going through creating a message within the new platform using the new editor, and then also using that within a mailing, and then having a look at the trend reports as well, and creating those trend reports to group those different mailings together. But thanks for your time today. Hopefully you found that useful, and you can sort of see how easy it is to create one of those messages in the platform, which is send out that email.